Hello, my name is Sarah Zenaida Gould, and I am the Interim Executive Director of the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute. I'm pleased to introduce tonight's panelists for a conversation about Mexican American civil engagement and the 2020 election. With us tonight is Dr. Rogelio Saenz, professor in the Department of Demography at the University of Texas at San Antonio. He has written extensively in the areas of demography, Latinos, race and ethnic relations, inequality, immigration, public policy, social justice, and human rights. He is co-author of Latinos in the United States, Diversity and Change, and Latino Issues, a reference handbook. He's also co-editor of the International Handbook of the Demography of Race and Ethnicity, as well as Latinos in the United States, Changing the Face of America. He regularly writes op-ed essays on current demographic, social, racial, economic, and political issues, with contributions appearing in many papers, including the Austin American Statesman, the Baltimore Sun, San Antonio Express News, New York Times, and many more. In 2018, the American Association for Access, Equity, and Diversity presented Saenz its Cesar Estrada Chavez Award, an honor that recognizes an individual who has demonstrated leadership in support of workers' rights and humanitarian issues. We also have with us Lydia Camarillo, president of the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project. She has worked with SVREP for 21 years and has served as political and business consultant and has served on the 2001 Villaraigosa campaign and was CEO of the 2000 Democratic National Convention. She served from 1994 to 1999 as executive director of the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project. And before that, she served as national leadership director for the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, MALDEF, from 1989 to 1994. She also worked for the Latino Issues Forum of Monterey Bay Girl Scouts as a field organizer before she joined MALDEF. She serves on a number of boards, including the Earth Day Network and the King Awards. She serves as chair of the Texas Latino Redistricting Task Force, on which she served since 2011. The task force is made up of 8 organizations and sued Texas on the 2011 Texas State Redistricting Congressional and State House maps. She serves as chair of the Texas Senate Latino Caucus and Mexican American Legislative Caucus Civic Engagement Task Force. Just this year, the National Organization for Women named Lydia as one of the 100 Sisters in Suffrage in the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment of the US Constitution. Next, we have Sharon Navarro, professor of political science at the University of Texas at San Antonio. She was born and raised in El Paso, and after receiving her bachelor's and master's degree at the University of Texas at El Paso, she went on to get a master's and doctorate from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. She's an expert consultant on Latinas in American politics and has authored several books and articles on the subject. Her most recent publications include Latinas and the Politics of Urban Space, Race, Gender, Sexuality, and the Politics of the American Judiciary, Latinas in American Politics, Latino Urban Agency, and she's co-authored Políticas, Latina Public Officials in Texas, and authored Latina Legislator, Leticia Van de Putte and the Road to Leadership. She's currently working on a very timely book titled Race Wars, Racial Disparity During COVID-19. Her research interests are in women in politics, race in American politics, and Latinx politics. And then we have Henry Flores. Dr. Flores is the Distinguished University Research Professor Emeritus at St. Mary's and is senior faculty at St. Mary's School of Law. He earned his PhD in political science from the University of California, Santa Barbara. He's consulted in more than 40 federal civil lawsuits since 1986, 8 of which went before the Supreme Court of the US. He is the only national expert on racial intent in voting rights law. He's the author of 5 books, including Latinos and the Voting Rights Act and Racism, Latinos, and Public Policy. He's currently completing work on the biography of Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez. Dr. Flores is also a Vietnam combat veteran, having served with the 1st Cavalry Division in that conflict, and holds the Bronze Star with 3 oak leaf clusters. And now I would like to turn it over to Dr. Saenz, chair of the panel. Dr. Saenz.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. Buenas tardes. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, and I'd like to thank you, Sarah, for organizing this very important and timely panel, for asking me to moderate the panel, and also I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists for joining us here this evening. The context that we have here is we've seen the last 4 years a very unprecedented kind of behavior, a term. We've seen the hates and divisions that have been fomented. We've seen the attack on our Latino community. We've seen the murder of George Floyd by hands of the police, other African Americans dying as well as Latinos. And we've seen everything taking place in the midst of a pandemic, which seems to have no end right now. It is not an exaggeration to say that this is probably for all of us the most important election that we've ever experienced. Many pundits have been talking about this election representing a battle for the soul of this country. So we'll have the pleasure of hearing the discussion with our panelists today. I have a number of questions that they will be addressing that have to do with the civic engagement in our Latino community and with the 2020 election. So the first one is Texas is regularly been ranked as one of the states with the lowest levels of civic engagement and some of the lowest rates of voter turnout. This morning, the San Antonio Express News, in an article titled "An Unheard of Local Vote Tally," reported that Texas is leading the country in votes cast with 4 million ballots as of Sunday, which represents close to half of all votes cast in the 2016 presidential election. And there's still 2 weeks to go. And here, more closely in Bejar County, 60% of mail ballots that have been sent out have already been returned, have been received. So the question that I have here for our panelists is, what does this signify, and what role are Latinos playing in these major change and a lot of activity that is going on in the mail out as well as the early voting? And we'll start off with Lydia.
Thank you for this opportunity to talk to all of you and discuss the issue of the Latino community and the Latino vote and its impact related to COVID. Let me start by saying that Texas has a history of not voting, and it's important we remind ourselves of that, because when we think about Texas, the assumption is that because 25% or so of the electorate is Latino, that we're the ones at fault for not voting. And I have to tell you that the Latino electorate, is the fastest growing electorate. The median age of a Latino voter is 22 years old. When you pull out the immigrant community, about 800,000 Latinos turn 18 every year. And in Texas, I would argue that if I remember correctly, there was 1.9 million Latinos that voted in 2016, 1.3 million African Americans. In 2018, it was 1.2 million and 850,000 African Americans. I think this cycle, given the factors that I'll outline in a second, I think we're going to see 2.1 or more Latinos that will cast their vote. How does that equate to overall Texas voter registration? Well, there's an issue, or there's a point that the registration level went very high to 16.9 million in Texas. Although I looked also to see if any voters had been purged. In the last, I have not seen in the last week or so if any more voters were purged, but I looked about a month, and 2.1 million Latino voters had been purged, which it seems to me that there are probably voters that are low propensity voters, infrequent voters, but I'm concerned that some of those voters might in fact be Latino and African American. So that's one point. The second point is that because Texas has not had very many competitive races at the congressional, state house, and certainly no competition in southern Texas, that's another reason for the turnout to be not at the level that it should be. This time around, we have 4 to 7, depending on who's speaking. The Political Cook Report says it's only 4 toss-up races that are congressional seats, and there's 9 to 12 state house seats that are competitive. And of course, the U.S. Senate seat and the path to the White House, whether or not the 38 electoral votes goes to the current president or to Biden, it's up for the voters to decide what they're going to do. The last thing I want to say is that increasingly there's an argument that Latinos do not vote. And again, I reject that notion. We do vote. But in Texas, nobody invests money to turn out voters. No one. This cycle, it looks like, since it is getting competitive and the polls have put us in, yes, it's competitive. No, it's not competitive. I say it's only competitive if we have a true investment in the state. Mm-hmm. But because it looks like there's a shot, and it looks like some of the other places that both Trump and Biden want as this to win the White House and the Senate seats, which of course are Michigan, Iowa, North Carolina, Florida, might not go the way that depending on who's going wants it to go, that both parties now are competing for Texas. And that's where we're seeing that it looks like someone just invested $28 million to try to get MJ to win. So I know there's other panelists, though. I just want to say the Latino electorate is very concerned with the issues. The COVID is a big issue for them because, as we know, nationally, 30% of the cases are Latino. And my own family, 3 out of 4 got it. So we have to be very careful because it has consequences not only about healthcare, but it has consequences about jobs and the economy. And last but not least, we cannot forget that losing Ruth Bader Ginsburg sets the tone to making sure that the Senate seat in Texas and Arizona and Colorado and North Carolina and South Carolina and Iowa and some of Maine are very critical. There was really no competitive Senate seats at the beginning of this conversation about a year ago, and now there's as many as 7. So let's see. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Sharon?
Thank you. I want to piggyback off of what she said. I think there's a sense of urgency on 2 fronts. The first is there's a sense that their vote really matters. There's a sense of urgency that they perhaps change their future. And this is a chance for their vote to count, or to do that. They want mail-in, and they want to walk it into a mail drop box to assure that. The second front is, I think, and she spoke well to it, the concern for the coronavirus. It has hit the Latino community fairly hard, and there's a lot of precaution about how to vote and timing to vote, and make sure they get their votes in earlier so that they don't have to stand in the long lines on election day. And I think that, coupled with the state of the economy and healthcare, makes it incredibly important for Latinos to make sure that they plan and go out and vote.
Thank you, Sharon. Henry?
Oh, well, Lydia made most of the really, really important issues. One of the things that's interesting, though, is that as of today, 4.7 million voters have voted in Texas, which is more than all the votes that Donald Trump received in the last general election.
That's right.
So the turnout here is huge, and the turnout records are being broken in the urban areas. Harris County, Dallas, Travis County, Fort Worth, Tarrant County, and Bexar County are really close behind. A lot of those central city areas, major areas, are Latino and Latino dense at this point. I don't know what the turnout is like in the Valley, so I can't speak to that. But one of the, for me, the most, not the most important, but one of the most important issues is the, and you raised this issue, Rogelio, earlier during introducing this segment of our conversation, is the environment of kind of hatred and anger and violence that's permeated American society. And with this general election, we have the opportunity to change all of that, to reverse that whole trend of ugliness and of hate that's out there. And a major turnout in that respect would be a vote against racism, would be a vote against hatred, and so forth. Of course, Sharon, Dr. Navarro is correct. I mean, there's a lot of important issues out there. They're important to Latinos, so they need to vote. Healthcare, the ACA is in danger at this particular point. Immigration reform, we have a I don't know if you've listened to NPR recently. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if you've listened to NPR recently, but we have a huge backlog of refugees at the border. They're just sitting around in refugee camps waiting to come in the United States, and they can't get an asylum hearing to get in here because the administration is just not moving on these things. Some people are getting discouraged, but as they go back to their home countries, they're in danger of their lives or experiencing some sort of violence. So that's important. The economy needs to be brought back. And just goes on and on. There's an array of issues out there that are so important at this election, and Latinos have the opportunity of being a deciding factor in that way.
Mm-hmm. And very much important that a lot of people are kind of concentrating on Donald Trump and so forth, but the importance of these races go all the way from the federal level to the state level to the local level and so forth. Very important, and we need to remember that. And so along those points, and Henry, you covered very well the kinds of political issues that are impacting the Latino community and that are very important that need to be addressed. What about at the state level? Sharon, could you address some of those issues that are also pressing kinds of issues at the level of the state?
Well, in political science, we always look towards national climate affecting state and local issues. And at the state level, there are the concerns of the coronavirus and the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Who's going to get it? The essential workers. I think the other major issue has to do with the economy and jobs. People are concerned. Are they going to have their jobs? A lot of people are in unemployment, receiving disability, and pay for loss of jobs and not being able to work, and also the issues of immigration still apply to Texas. We're right there at the border. People wanting to come in, and at the state level, or I should say the local level, I think it's a little more interesting because we have this sense of food insecurity, rent insecurity, housing insecurity, or paramount here in San Antonio. We see it every day when we turn on the news. So, it sort of trickles down. And at the local level, we feel the impact so much more.
Yeah. And Lydia, if you could address also some of the local issues and some of the bonds that are in place right now, for example, the pre-K and the workforce issues and so forth that are taking place, and also that conflict that we have seen between the state level and the urban communities. Right. That is a big issue, that continues to be a big issue, that you see a lot of progressive kind of movement in our bigger cities, but then the pushback and the squashing that is done from the governors and state level.
Well, I mean, if you're referring to the way we're dealing with COVID, it's clear that one of the first questions that I would be asked by reporters and people who would call me from other states and would ask me, why is it that Texas is doing so well compared to New York at the beginning of this whole COVID conversation? And my response was because we have leaders at the local level, the city and counties in the major cities that are Democrat, and they believe in science. Mm-hmm. And that led to many Houston, we have the first Latina that's 29 years old county judge who immediately took control of the situation and shut the place and demanded that everybody use quarantine and use masks. The same here with obviously our mayor and our county judge, the same in Dallas. And so we began to see that. And then the conflict between the governor and the lieutenant governor to open the state, because that's the narrative by the president. Now, two things that are the narrative to COVID that have to do with this election. One, the president and Republican governors, with a few exceptions, are arguing that we cannot close the economy, and therefore we cannot close the states, and we cannot close the economies because at the end of the day, we're going to be hurt. Now, science is saying that in order for us to basically this virus have no more host, it means that we all have to protect ourselves, and we all have to have a vaccine that will be vaccinated globally twice, which means that we're going to have this issue before us in San Antonio and in Texas, and it will have local impact. What does that mean? We also saw, in spite of the fact that it looked like Texas was doing well, and I even have for a minute there, I think that the state of Texas was not allowing people who had positive results on the COVID test because they lost hours for over a month and a half. They were being not reported so that you could have and say that Texas is doing well. All those issues have implications on the elections. And they also have implications on the local races. They have implications on how we organize. For instance, we at Southwest Voter were getting ready to target 1,000 high schools to register them in the classroom. 75% or better Latino schools around the state, starting with Bexar County and up and down all of Texas. And for better or for worse, I told my team, do the in-class registrations in April and in May, because that's when most kids turn 18, and then the schools were closed. We were, with that, 1,000 high school students, we were going to register 140,000 high school students. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean we accepted the conditions of our current reality. But we contacted people, since we're all now interacting as we are right now through the internet. We asked the principals to let us still register the students, and we would mail them the cards, or they can print them. But we know that our students are not having the kind of results that they need to have, because some of the kids do not have the equipment. So all those issues, I think, are part of the problem. And I know I didn't answer your question. And part of the reason I didn't answer your question is because I don't have an answer on the bonds. So I'll turn it over to my other two panelists.
Henry, could you talk a little bit about the pre-K, maybe some of those are the pre-K and the workforce? Yeah.
Who, me?
Yeah,
I say the truth.
No. I mean, those two particular issues are extremely important to San Antonio. They're on the general election ballot, and particularly for Texas, we have a long ballot, so you have to go all the way to the end of the ballot
to the bottom.
And then there've been some advertising, but I'm not sure how effective the advertising has been to get to the general public. But essentially, the pre-K for SA is just a reauthorization of the 1/8 cent property tax that has already been levied to continue pre-K for SA, which has been very successful, and it's been a model for the nation, really. And one thing, I was on the task force that talked about the role of education in San Antonio, and we concluded that to have a real viable workforce, what you need to do is, which is the foundation for economic development, just generally speaking, is you need to link education from pre-K all the way through higher education. Education is one holistic, and children can't be successful in elementary school, high school, and university unless they get a really good head start. So pre-K for SA is really a very important issue, and that was an initiative under Mayor Castro, and it's just been one of the most successful programs we've ever had in San Antonio. The workforce development is really, really important, given, I'm sorry, I stand corrected, it's 1/8 cent sales tax, not property. I just got corrected in the chat room. Thank you, Francis. But the workforce development initiative is also very important, particularly in this day and age of coronavirus that has just decimated the small business community and the labor forces in San Antonio and throughout the state. generally, well, across the whole nation, but in San Antonio, it will help kind of reinvigorate the workforce to get them eligible for whatever's going to come out of them, whatever going to look like our economic environment after the coronavirus. As far as other issues are concerned, at the state level, I think Dr. Navarro had some really good comments about issues that are very, very important for funding. For me, though, we're coming up to the session that deals with redistricting at the level, the state senate level. Eventually, it's going to reach the city council level. And in San Antonio, I do know that the city council districts are malapportioned. In other words, some of them have a heck of a lot more population in them than others. And there's going to be a discussion about how many city council districts are we going to have? What are they going to look like in the future? Those decisions are made for congressional districts and state assembly districts are made in the state legislature. So you have to think about when you cast your vote, who's going to be sitting in there and how are they going to make those kinds of decisions? And down the line, in the municipal elections down the line, it's going to be the same question. You're going to have to figure out who's going to redistrict the city council districts and what our council is going to look like down the line. All of those are important because they have public policy implications. Whoever sits in those positions are going to be voting on educational funding, Medicaid, and just an array of other policies important to the Latino community.
Yeah. And Dr. Navarro, could you comment also on the President Trump's call that undocumented immigrants not be counted in terms of the census, which is an issue that is very directly connected to political redistricting. And it seems that the Supreme Court will be hearing the argument by the end of November, I think it is, when that is going to take place. Yeah.
I think it's incredibly important. It speaks to the fact that Latinos present a huge power in terms of voter outcome. And if you can stifle it with immigration and rules and limits on who can come into this country, it certainly speaks to the perceived threat that they can play towards one political party. Now, is it important in terms of political issues? Well, it depends on the types of rules and data that you read. You're talking about generational differences and how important that is. But when you talk about Texas, we all know that, one Latino knows another Latino who's affected by immigration. Stifle counts, shortening it is going to have a huge impact on representation. And Dr. Flores is right in terms of funding and infrastructure that has future implications on the Latino community that we have yet to see, but can only imagine would be negative. And I'll leave that to my other colleagues to expand on.
Yeah. Lydia or Henry, any additional comments?
Well, I just wanted to add that I was surprised that, and I'm glad that I'm surprised. It was a good news. I understand from a report that I read that San Antonio or Bexar County count was 99.9% of everybody that needed to be counted. I am surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised. We've been following the census issues. Obviously, Maldiv sued. We're one of the many plaintiffs that filed a lawsuit against the citizenship question. Then I'm a person. Then as an individual, I filed a lawsuit because they obviously don't want to count us during redistricting. I'm very worried about that. But to the point about the count, as we were following it, if the state was 50% Latino drawn districts, majority drawn districts in southern, the Southwest, because we were following Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, California, and Texas, we were finding that we were 15 points behind from the count, which has implications not only on resources, but as Dr. Flores clearly has just mentioned, and Dr. Navarro, we're about to be counted in the sense of how many congressional seats will Texas get. The last cycle, we got 4 out of the, other states. Florida got 2, but Michigan and Pennsylvania, and New York and Pennsylvania each lost 1. This cycle, we were expecting again 3 to 4. Nina Perales at Maldo says it's 3. I say it's 4. But, at the end of the day, I don't know what it's going to be because I don't believe that we were fully counted. And as a result, instead of gaining, we may actually lose a seat. I hope that the rest of the city, because I didn't get a chance to look afterwards, because the Census Bureau dropped that element where you can check. We weren't able to check it. So I don't know what was the real count, but I can tell you that Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico, and Washington and Oregon are supposed to each gain a seat. Who knows about California? But Texas is supposed to gain 3 to 4 congressional seats. And I'm not sure we're going to get it. I think instead we might end up losing, and that's a problem. And so I think politically we have to think about how do we argue that in spite of the count, there's people here. You all are demographers, and you know how you can help us figure out, because I think that'll be part of the next battle. We are here even if we weren't counted, and therefore we're going to need the services. So I'm sorry.
So you have really the Texas leadership that is operating against the state's best interests in terms of the congressional seats, obviously, but not only that, but the distribution of federal funds as well. Federal funds that are going to be vastly needed during as we try to recover from the pandemic and so forth. That it's going to have long-term consequences. The next 10 years, the shelf life of those numbers are going to be impacting us every year. Now I want to move a little closer.
I was going to add one thing to this conversation, is that I thought that question had already been answered by the Supreme Court, in that in the Constitution it's very clearly stated that everybody in the population is counted regardless of citizenship, period. Sotomayor wrote an opinion on that. But this goes to an interesting notion that those who want to suppress the vote will keep coming back to the same over and over. Packaging it a little bit differently. So,
and that's the fear that once you start changing the composition of the Supreme Court, like it's likely to happen, that has major consequences with these kind of cases. And Lydia, one more question, and you and I have had this conversation over the years, and that is the large number of Latinos that are turning age 18 every year. Here in Texas, about 203,000 every year turn age 18, and just to give you a comparison, it's the white population is about 128,000 or something. So big difference, and this really we're seeing the changes in terms of the potential for political power in the Latino community, but it's so important with the youth that are coming and turning age 18. And I applaud what Southwest Voter is doing in terms of engaging and trying to get, because many schools have either closed their eyes in terms of providing those opportunities for kids to get registered to vote. So that's extremely important. Are there any other, with respect to registration, any other activities that Southwest Voter did this cycle to try to increase the registration?
Well, we've been working. We like to think about the increases, which is, I think, is going to end up being about 500,000 new Latino voters if we didn't lose any, right? Because I said, as I started the conversation, 2.1 million were purged. I don't know who was purged, but so I think that we did that. But currently, because since we're 14 days out from the election, we are now targeting 500,000 Latinos that registered to vote. It's actually more like 470 something, 79 emails to voters who registered since December of 2016, contacted them to turn out to vote. We're also doing social media ads targeting Dallas, Fort Worth, and San Antonio. And last but not least, I don't know if I'm going to do it tomorrow or the next day. We're launching the raffle of a car. And the entrada to win the car, the 2020 car, is that you must turn out a new voter that's Latino. That voter must have registered in since 2016, December of 2016. I am surprised because I've been studying the list in the last few days that I was expecting a lot of young people. And it's a lot of people that are in their 30s and older. And I think it's a consequence of people finally saying in Texas, Chihuahua, nos están comiendo el mandado. We better stand back and fight and allow ourselves to protect ourselves with a vote. Because most of I'm looking at CD21, CD28, all of the different CDs. And I'm telling you, it's like la mayoría estamos mayores, and it's like finally people are registering vote. When we also had our drive-throughs, like the McDonald's, and people were coming up and telling us, "I know I have to register. I haven't done it before ever, but now I know I have to protect my family." I've never heard that in Texas.
Yep. And you have people 60s, 70s voting for the first time. I mean, that's beautiful to see. Dr. Navarro, with regard to the youth, political science research has shown that the youth tend to have lower voting participation, as the argument was made right now, the discussion. Is this still the trend that is taking place? Do you see any research that is suggesting some changes, particularly in the environment that we're in right now, with the protests and so forth?
I think part of it is understanding where the participation is occurring, and we've seen it across our television sets and on social media. The youth tend to engage more in alternative participations in what we consider political science. The protesting, engaging through social media is where they're at now. I think one of the research shows that habit formation is incredibly important. If we can socialize our youth to become non-voters to voters by habit, a family member, this is where socialization is incredibly important. Your friends, the people who you hang out with, the institutions, all can send a message that it is important to vote. Let's go and vote. Taking someone to the polls is incredibly important. In addition, it's also important that we sort of start in the high school, as some of the research is suggesting. It's already been spoken to here. Changing the curriculum in terms of civic education, and in stressing the importance and describing political participation, what that actually means. I can't tell you how many students that I teach in the Texas politics government, when I talk about voter participation and how important voting is and what the ballot is about, they are just absolutely shocked that they did not receive this kind of education in high school. And I think it's not only important to start registering them in high school, but also explaining to them a little bit about the voting process and what that means is incredibly important. And I would also add to that, giving them the direct, specific information about voting. And because we're all bombarded by social media and all this misinformation, and it's so easy to take that information and be confused. But if they have that direct information, that's incredibly vital to turnout. And the last point I'll add, and then I'll shut up, is working to reduce the systemic barriers, like registration. It's incredibly tough here in Texas when you compare to other states. Voter ID. There's a lot of misinformation about that, and I think those are ways that we can sort of change the path of youth to become good citizens in terms of voting. Yep. The rest of my colleagues.
Yeah, thank you very much. And there was a study that was just in the papers a few days ago that was showing that Texas leads the nation in terms of barriers to voting, how costly, how time consuming, and so forth. And that's where we really need that change as well in terms of our elected officials. Anything to add, Dr. Flores? On this?
I just, yay, we're number one.
Yeah.
One thing. I just finished testifying in an interesting lawsuit in East Texas, Waller County, which is just
Yeah.
due west of Harris County. And
Prairie View A&M.
Prairie View A&M, yeah. Again, Prairie View A&M. Prairie View and A&M and Waller County are kind of infamous because they've been mentioned so many times in the voting rights legislation and speeches on the floor of Congress and so forth. Waller County has a history of trying to keep the black students of Prairie View A&M, which is a historically black college, from voting. And one of the interesting things about understand is exactly what Dr. Navarro was saying, that the importance of political socialization means making access to younger people easier. And one of the best ways to do it is put a polling place on the school campus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't think we do enough of that. And Waller County knew that, and they kept denying the students, they kept denying the students, and they keep losing every time. They keep, U.S. Marshals go, the FBI goes, Department of Justice goes, but they still keep doing the same thing over and over again. But I think one of the interesting things would be to put a polling place on you think UTSA has one already?
Yeah, it does.
College districts have one. Arlea Lake had one for the first time ever this year. And those are in university campuses. Maybe put one on high school campuses here and there. I don't know if anybody's ever thought of that, but there might be some, not just the school students going, but folks in the neighborhood around the high school going on election day to participate. We'd set good examples for the students. You could have the civics class right there, because Navarro is correct. I've done surveys of my freshman classes, and you'd be surprised how ignorant of civic responsibility and citizen responsibilities the students are, and they're coming in. They don't government classes. They don't get classes on how to vote, the responsibilities of voting, the importance of voting, and things of that nature. And we really need to change orientation quite a bit.
Okay. And now what I want to do is just give each of the panelists the last word and last thoughts that they would like to share with the voters out there. And again, the importance of this vote, the importance of the election, and so forth, so that we could have just a few closing remarks from each of the panelists. So, Lydia?
Well, I just want to, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. Those of you that are listening, I'd like to challenge you to take 10 friends to vote. And I want you to ask those 10 friends to ask 10 friends. And if you're not sure where to start, as I mentioned, join us. Go to our website, www.svrip.org. If you're not sure, just use the SVRIP and go in there and sign up to be a volunteer to do our virtual phone bank, to go after the car. We will provide a list of voters. Like I said, Dr. Flores, it is funny. We've done this before. We gave 4 cars in 2004. It increased the turnout, but we failed to do one thing that we did the second time, and I'll talk about it in 2 seconds. We didn't do an analysis of the increase the impact that it would have on the increase. The second time, we didn't do a car, we did cash because it was a different kind of election. But it was in Los Angeles. Dr. Fernandez Guerra did an evaluation, and we noted that it increased the turnout by 30%.
Wow.
So we're not doing it just porque queremos, be cute about it. We're doing it because we know that there's an opportunity for people to engage. And it's basically going to create a lot of volunteers, because for the sake of a better number, the 500,000 voters that we're reaching out, we're asking them to join in the turning out the voters and in the raffle. And then the other 500,000, we're reaching in 4 other states, including California, because no tienen nada más que hacer, because they have the best possibilities. They have online voter registration we don't have. They have same-day registration we don't have. They register kids at 17, not at 18, to be ready, and on and on and on. So So we're asking other states, because the Texas law says you can't have other people. All you got to be a volunteer, 18 and over. You can be a dreamer. You can live anywhere in the United States, and you can help us make sure that Latinos in Texas change this world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lydia. Dr. Navarro?
Your voice is your vote. It is so incredibly important that you exercise that privilege. If it wasn't so important, there wouldn't be so many barriers placed upon you, making it so challenging for you to vote. So please go out and vote. And I appreciate being on this panel with my distinguished colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Flores?
Yeah, again, thank you all very much for inviting me on the panel. I appreciate it. This is an important panel, and I agree with my colleagues. The vote is very, very important. It's the link to public policy, and it's the link to representation. And your vote doesn't count. Politicians watch the vote, and they watch the way the voters cast their ballots. So your one vote in it by itself may not seem too important, but it has a cumulative effect when a lot of people vote. When a lot of people vote, those politicians will listen. They watch the polls. Believe you me, they watch the polls. If dudes watch your behavior from time to time. So it's important to get out there and vote, and that's one thing. Secondly, based upon my own experience in the voting rights movement over the last 30 some odd years, I'll tell you that there's been more and more attempts to try to keep people from voting. If you don't exercise your vote, you're losing the most precious constitutionally protected right that you've got to vote, because that is the most precious right that we've got in this country. Believe you me.
Thank you very much for each of you. Those were very insightful and inspiring words. Now, I believe we have time for some questions from the audience. Let's see. Turning to see if Sarah has that. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. If you need me to read some questions out loud, I can.
Sure.
Okay. The first question is, why is it that Mexican American voters underperform as a voting demographic?
I don't think they underperform. I think that if we're looking at, most of the Latinos live in, we live everywhere. And we live in the Midwest, we live everywhere. But for the particular conversation about Texas, the competition in where most of us live is in South Texas, and the competition takes place in the primaries. And so there's little investment, number one. Number two, for better or for worse, it's the challenge that those of us that are involved in this space, if you will, have been arguing with all of the various candidates that you cannot win Texas, this particular statewide, without talking to and garnering the support of the Latino electorate. But it's usually this way. That goes for national campaigns, for statewide campaigns, whatever city, whatever state I'm in. We're going to go after, this is what they say, not me, we're going to go after the white vote, and we're going to invest in the white vote. And the white vote is divided into suburbia women, independents, swing voters, senior citizens. We're going to go after the black vote, maybe, and we're going to invest. And then the last group that is invested is the Latino electorate. We're expected to turn out at the same level that other groups are invested. Ask Time Steyer and Bloomberg how much money they spent to turn out voters in order to have a significant number of delegates. It takes resources. So first. Second, and the last thing I'm going to say, because I know that the time is running out, there's other colleagues that want to say something. The median age of a Latino voter is 22 years old. So you need to talk to them, ojo a ojo, or ear to ear, about what's important to them, because young people care about the elections. And as I said, to my surprise, More and more people my age and older have registered to vote this cycle. So I expect that they're going to make sure con la chancla that the young ones do it as well. Gracias.
Anyone else would like to add?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right.
Next question. What is the attraction of some Latinos to President Trump?
Ooh, nice, good question. I think part of the, I'll give that one a shot. I think part of the attraction is, for some anyways, is bravado, for lack of a better term. You know, he puts on this tough guy, very manly kind of arrogant approach to things, and that appeals to some aspect of some in the Latino culture. And so there's going to be some attracted to that. Of course, some are going to be repelled by it too. But in fact, I think the vast majority of Latinos are going to be repelled by it. But still, I think that's going to be part of it. Underlying that, though, is there may be some that have anti-immigrant sentiments too, that like what he said about building a wall, and like what he says about, you know, keeping immigrants from coming into the United States. So I think what you know, I've looked at data on what percentage of the Latino population support Trump, and it's not very much. It's not very high at all. Matter of fact, it's amazingly low, with the exception of the Florida Latinos, and a lot of those are the Cubans that have historically been mostly conservative. So I think you accidentally ran into whoever asked that question accidentally ran into a very small minority of Latinos who are attracted to Trump. So I mean, that's my take on it.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think Dr. Flores is correct. He highlights that generational divide. And when I looked at the 2016 presidential elections, there was a significant difference between first generations and their support for President Trump versus second and third generation. And that's something that kind of got overlooked in medias and polls. The other factor is a third of the population, and Dr. Flores is correct again, and it's interesting, you know, how media sort of plays into our framing and imagery of what we call leadership is the personality effect. You know, Latinos look to someone that makes them safe, has a strong personality, regardless of what comes out of their mouth. You know, and he projects that, and in media and framing that speaks volumes to a voter who doesn't want to take the initiative to seek out the correct information. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think also they close their nose those that don't love him, that vote for him, because it's about the platform. Less government, the abortion issue, the religious question. I think those things are the economics, the business. I think those factors are part of the factors. But I agree with Dr. Flores. It's going to be, I would say, no more than 30% in Texas, and maybe it's 27%, and maybe even less.
Yeah.
Given what I was just saying about the folks that are registering to vote recently.
Okay, there's a question. What strategies should we use to make voter registration automatic in Texas when you turn 18?
First thing, vote. That's the first strategy. Legislators decide. Elections are decided by state house members. They define what the laws will be, and when we have more Latinos and women and other Blacks, others who care about people voting, we will look more like the laws that are affected for elections are going to be more like California and other states. That's the first strategy, and I'm going to stick with that because I know we have other panelists who have better ideas than I do.
Not me. I agree with you. I agree with you. No, you have to elect the officials that will carry that particular issue because Lydia is correct. I mean, state law writes those requirements, and so we have to elect the individuals for the Texas State Legislature who are willing to pass a law like that.
And unless we change the trio that are running Texas, things will be the same.
Oh, yeah.
And the Congress and the Senate will decide on when we can reinstate the Voting Rights Act, which will give us a lot of protections that we don't have right now. So it's all, that's why I said vote.
Yep.
Yeah.
Historically speaking, what is the highest voter turnout we've ever had in Texas? Might we be seeing a new record?
1.9 million, 2016. And I believe it's going to be 2.1 million. Again, this is the first year I cannot project because I don't know how COVID is going to do. But given that every day we've had an incredible turnout in Texas and all, Saenz and Navarro, I don't know if you think differently, but I don't know if it's a rush, those los que iban a votar on election day, or it's truly, global and everybody's turning out to vote in record numbers. I don't have a good sense yet.
Yeah, I have a feeling that, I don't know why, I've got this strange feeling, because I don't have any numbers to back this up, but that we're going to approach 80% of voter participation prior to election day. And I really think that's going to be really, really high, given the way we're voting in the nation right now. But there seems to be like Dr. Navarro pointed out at the beginning of the top of the hour, there seems to be an urgency of folks needing to vote. I only hear, it's anecdotal, you hear interviews on the street all the time. This is the most important election in my life. It's a matter of life or death. I got to vote. I saw a thing the other day about a poor guy who dying of cancer, and his son took him to the poll to cast his ballot, and then he died. And they threw his ballot out because he had so it didn't count. It wouldn't count by the day that they're going to count the ballot. But he just had to get out of his deathbed to cast his ballot because he felt it was so important, And so I think it's going to drive. We're going to have an all-time record turnout this time around, I think.
Yeah. I think that there's that sense of urgency and the sense that we need this election. We need to make drastic changes. Como le dijiste, Lydia, nos están comiendo el lonche. The people realizing that, and they're saying, "I'm going to have to go out there and vote for my family, for my kids, and so forth." Yeah.
Okay, what are the battleground states that you're watching?
Whoa.
I don't want to be first again, so somebody, then I'll tell you mine, because
No.
I'll take that. I usually watch the big states because the big states can usually determine outcome, but that's not necessarily the case. In 2016, Barack Obama lost Ohio and Iowa and still won the election. So, but on election night, I'm looking East Coast. I'm looking at the big states to see the voter turnout, and then going to right to left on the map. And for me, that's the predictive model. But I think every state right now is kind of determining where they lie, and depending on the poll that you want to follow and believe, your state's always winning or losing.
Yeah, I think for early it'd be Pennsylvania. Florida is a good indicator, but Florida could be difficult because Florida's got such a history of corruption in their election system. It's hard to determine what's happening there. But Pennsylvania will be a good one to look at, I think. And I think on the in the Midwest, maybe Wisconsin would be a good one to look at, and I think another one to look at on the West Coast would be Arizona.
Yeah, I'm looking at Arizona, and Georgia, because it has two U.S. Senate seats, and it moved from very red in a matter of days, and I'm exaggerating, to toss-up, and it's 2 U.S. Senate seats that are now toss-up. Looking at Southern Caroline, and of course Arizona and Texas. We're working it. I mean, but the 3 states that we are working at are Arizona, Texas, and Georgia, because I think that those matter. I think that Pennsylvania is maybe gone. And so I think that Texas becomes even more important, but we'll see.
Yeah. I hope Pennsylvania's gone.
Okay, there's a question about the census. There's some confusion when it comes to race and ethnicity when you're filling out the census as a Mexican American. In particular, there's a question about indigeneity and how do you identify yourself according to census categories when you are Mexican American?
Well, for Latinos and Latinas, the question is first whether you are Hispanic or Latino, and you answer yes. And then the second is the racial category, which are one of those would be the American Indian or Alaska Native, which would be the closest in terms of the indigenous category. And then there's the African American or Black, white, and Asian, and there's Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, and then multiracial, and then the other. So, but the important one, I think, is the first question having to do with is the person Latino or Hispanic, and then there's that second question, which there was a big discussions in the Census Bureau and the Office of Management of Budget, whether we were going to change and drop to only a race category or not, and then the decision was that it would continue the same. The same thing with the MENA group, the Middle Eastern, Northern Africa group, really without a racial category, a proper racial category is the other.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not oh, go ahead.
I always remind them, remember, it's about political power.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you say you're other,
So,
Yeah.
somebody, if you're Black and Native American, nobody gets anything. So choose. Power.
No, that's right. That's really important to identify first as a Spanish
yeah.
American, the Spanish
Yeah.
surname category at the top, and then race, whatever you feel is what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
some folks that feel that they're indigenous, among Latinos, we're so heterogeneous, it's ridiculous. And so it's really difficult to really create one identity that everybody's going to be satisfied with.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And as we more intermarry, and we want to be respectful of every relative that is related to us. But as I remind my children who are also Cohen, Latino political power, and they agree.
Okay. Yeah. So it's important.
Of course, they're men now.
Or Hispanic. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this is going to be the last question. Is there a common issue that Latino voters can get behind? What is that?
I think healthcare right now, because we are getting sick, and we don't have, and that has implications about whether we're able to work and protect and sustain our families. But I think the reason we don't have an answer is because there's certain things that Latinos always pull with education and healthcare are equal as important.
Yeah.
And I think healthcare now, because of the COVID.
Yeah. And especially in places here like Texas that still, even though people are losing their jobs and their health care, if they had it through their employer, Texas refuses to expand Medicaid. Yeah.
It's another place we hold number one, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, if the question was, what is one issue that all Latinos would get behind? Well, you get probably a lot behind immigration, a lot would get behind housing and economic issues. But Lydia's right. At this current time, the whole nation's getting sick, and we need really good health care. One of the issues in this forthcoming election is what's going to happen to the American Affordability Act. Who's going to take care of us? How are we going to pay for whatever healthcare needs we have coming down the line. And so I think we really have to look at that, because issues like the coronavirus are here for not just next year, but the way scientists are discovering more viruses coming out of the environment through climate change and so forth, we're going to have wave after wave after wave of these things. So we have to have an administration that looks at, one, what's in the future, and two, invest a lot of money in research and as far as vaccinations and public health issues and things of that nature. So I think healthcare is the number one.
I agree. All right. So go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you so much to all of the panelists. I want to thank Dr. Rogelio Saenz for putting this panel together on behalf of MACRI. This was a wonderful conversation. Just the conversation that I'm seeing in the chat has got people very excited. I hope that means everybody has either already voted or is about to go vote. It's just so nice to hear from this amazing panel of experts, and thank you for your time. I hope that everybody stays healthy and has a good night. I don't know if you want to say goodbye, Rogelio.
I'd like to thank you, Sarah, for putting the panel together and getting all of us here, and also our three distinguished panelists. And it was great to see all four of you here virtually. And I'd also like to thank the audience for joining us. Great questions, great comments. I hope everybody's inspired, and we go and change the world in the next 2 weeks. Hasta luego. Buenas noches.
Buenas noches. Gracias, Sara, Rogelio.
Gracias.
Gracias.